For the Detroit Lions, the last couple of years, the passing defense has been an area of weakness for the team. But with the addition of 2 rookie cornerbacks in the draft, many people are wondering if it's going to be enough to be able to change the Lions' fortunes and help them get that championship they're looking for. We're going to talk about it in this episode, folks. So stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are? And what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have 1 ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10, 5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, here's the thing, folks. Got a lot of stats, got a lot of stuff to talk about, so we're not going to take any time with the formalities. We're just diving straight on in here. So let's get to it here. As I said in the intro, if we think about it, the biggest area of weakness for the Lions over the last couple of years that has continued to remain the way it has been for primarily, that period of time has been the pass defense. It's gotten a little bit better, but let's just be fair and honest with ourselves. That has been primarily the Achilles heel of the Lions over the last 3 years. It's the ability for us to stop opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers, which, well, to put it quite bluntly, is we have had no ability. We have not really been able to find a way to stop quarterbacks and wide receivers from carving us up like a Thanksgiving turkey. It just doesn't happen. And if you take a look over the last 3 years, and you take a look at all the statistical data that's out there, and you take a look at total yards that has been given up in the passing game, the average that's been given up per attempt, pass completion, touchdown, the whole 9 yards, as I'm about to put up on the screen, you're pretty much looking at our passing defense being below average. Overall, completely ranked, it's like in the early 20s. It's just not very good. And in some individualistic areas, we're like at the bottom of the totem pole. So yeah, it's very plainly obvious. Our passing defense over the last 3 years, it has stunk to high heaven and low hell. Let's just be honest. Well, here's the thing that we know. We just finished the draft at the end of April. We know that the Lions in the draft, they went out and they drafted with their first 2 picks in the draft, cornerback Enos Rakestraw, cornerback Terrion Arnold. Those 2 picks were made for a reason. I know Brad Holmes is going to say, hey, you know what? They were the best guys on the board. We go after best player, blah, 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 blah. That's great. That's grand. That's glorious. But let's understand something here. It was the biggest area of need that the Lions had to fix, had to address, had to improve. And the fact that the board fell the way that it did, the fact that the Lions were able to get those players where they were at, hey, I just consider that yet again a great job by Brad Holmes. But they were drafted for a reason. The Lions needed them. The Lions had to address the cornerback situation. And let's think about it. Let's understand the reasons why. Again, let's take a look over the last 3 years, since we're talking about the last 3 years of being, terrible for the Lions' passing defense. Let's take a look at the starting secondaries for the Lions over the last 3 years. Think about it. 2021, Tracy Walker, Will Harris, Jerry Jacobs, Amani Oruwariye. What do we know about all those guys? They're all gone. They're no longer here. You go to 2022, most of the same thing. Kirby Joseph, Deshaun Elliott, Jeff Okudah, Jerry Jacobs, Amani Oruwariye. Either cut or traded for the majority of them. The only one that's still here from that is Kirby Joseph. 2023 is the first time where actually there's about the same that are still here versus those that are cut. The guys that are no longer here from 2023, Cameron Sutton and Jerry Jacobs. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, they're still here and they're still starters. So think about that. Over the last 3 years of starting defensive secondaries that we've had, the majority of them are no longer here. They've been cut, they've been traded, whatever have you. And let's think about this. Let's actually think about why that's the case. Take a look at all the guys that were either cut, traded, whatever have you. They were all similar in one aspect or another. They were either leftovers from the Quinn Trisha era, or they were veteran free agents that we picked up. Otherwise, there were very, very few of them that were actually Brad Holmes draft selections. Think about it. Out of that entire group of names I just mentioned, the only guys that are Brad Holmes draft selections that have been primary starters for the Lions, Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. That's it. The rest of them were all guys that either were picked up in free agency or were leftovers from freaking Quinn Trisha. So when you think about it, it's no small wonder why our freaking pass defense has been one of epic, massive proportions of just being a letdown. Because if you think about it, when you have guys that are not fits from what your GM is providing you or is wanting to go after, you're going to have a hard time selling that. And if you think about it, there's a reason why we've continued to have problems in that area, because we haven't been able to get the guys that we would truly want or need in the draft, which is where Brad Holmes has done the most of his work, where he's done most of his team building. However, though, in this draft, we were finally able to do that. We were finally able to get some high-quality draft picks at cornerback. I mean, Terrion Arnold, Enos Rakestraw, first-round draft pick, second-round draft pick. That's quality, at least as far as value. But also think about it this way. For the first time since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been here, and since Aaron Glenn's been in charge of the defense, because I ain't going to forget that, for the first time in all of those situations, there is an entire defensive backfield that is filled with Brad Holmes draft picks. Think about it. Terrion Arnold, Enos Rakestraw, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Ife Melifonwu. I know that Carlton Davis is also in there, and he's not a Brad Holmes draft pick, but I'm just simply saying, the majority of the guys that are in that starting secondary are Brad Holmes picks. That, I think, is going to have a huge difference in why I think this year the Lions defense is finally going to make that turnaround. But the real question is, okay, you got the rookie cornerbacks, Arnold, Rakestraw. You went out and you got the veteran cornerback in Carlton Davis. Well, is that finally going to be enough to get the defense that Glenn has had to finally match the prowess of Ben Johnson and Jared Goff's offense? Is it actually going to be enough? Well, let's first and foremost understand why we're here with what we have. Let's understand that the Lions invested all these pieces for a reason. It wasn't just by chance, and it wasn't just, hey, you know what, things just kind of happened the way they did. No, this was planned. This was done by design. There was maybe a little bit of luck involved, but it was done for a reason. Let's first and foremost understand the fact that the Lions are in the NFC, and there are a lot of quarterback wide receiver tandems in the NFC that are going to challenge our ability to stop the pass. You take a look at the Rams with Stafford, Kupp, and Puka Nacua. You take a look at the Bucs with Baker, Evans, Godwin. You take a look at the Niners with Purdy, Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle. And then all these other teams like freaking the Eagles, the Falcons, the Packers. You can even throw in the Bears there. I don't know what to expect out of Williams, but for crying out loud, when you got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen on the same field, that's going to be a problem. So yeah, the reason I'm saying this is because we drafted those cornerbacks for a reason. We got a lot of teams that are in the NFC conference that we're going to have to contend with, and their primary mode of attack is going to be to throw the football. Kind of makes sense. But you also have to think about it this way too. We've known about this for years, but it's only getting worse. Football is becoming more of a passing sport with every single year. The running game is still used, but it's not used to the same degree anymore. It's a passing game now, which means if you want to be able to contend, you want to be able to win a Super Bowl, you have to be able to stop the pass. And when you think about it, like I've been saying, the last 3 years, what has been the Lions' Achilles heel? Stopping quarterbacks and wide receivers from shredding us. So the question is, are the additions enough? Well, we first have to understand the defensive scheme that we have. Glenn runs a 4-2-5 scheme. That's been known for the last couple of years. But Glenn is stating that now he wants to do a defensive scheme concept which focuses on blitzing a lot, being very aggressive, and also using man coverage. Well, let's analyze how the cornerbacks that we picked up this offseason are going to fit into this. Let's first take a look at Carlton Davis. Carlton Davis, before coming to the Lions, was with Tampa Bay since 2018. He was under coach Todd Bowles, first as his defensive coordinator, then as his head coach. Well, think about it. Todd Bowles' defensive concept, his defensive scheme is exactly right up what Glenn likes to do. Very, very heavy blitz, very heavy on aggression, but also likes to utilize a lot of man coverage concepts. They want to be in your face. They want to be aggressive. They want to be physical. That's exactly what Todd Bowles likes to do. Would then make sense why the Lions would trade for Carlton Davis, because that's the exact same kind of concept that they're trying to run here. So what better thing to do but go out and get a guy that fits that concept with a manageable trade? I mean, you got him for a third-round draft pick. I don't think that's too much to ask for in return. Well, let's think about it. Carlton Davis is not the greatest cornerback in the world, but he's solid. And if you take a look at his stats, he played his best in Tampa from 2020 to 2022. Last year was a bit of a down year for him. But think about it here. When you take a look at all of his stats that are from his ability to play in man versus zone coverage, I'm going to put those stats up on the screen here so that way you can see them. But if you take a look at those stats from 2019, and I'm talking about under Bowles, you take a look from when he was under Bowles from 2019 to 2023 and his comparison between man coverage and zone coverage, you're seeing a guy that has the ability to play solid in both. He can be both solid in zone coverage and he can be both solid in man coverage. It's not like he does either one too particularly well, like great, but they're solid. It's good coverage. So what you have here is a cornerback who's both equally good in both types of coverage, but he also brings that Super Bowl championship experience, which is going to be crucial, important to this defense to up its game, to up its quality. But then on top of that, he brings that veteran experience, that veteran quality that's going to help Rakestraw and Arnold develop. He's going to provide them with that experience in that cornerback room, which is going to allow them to progress even further and faster, especially when you take a look at the fact that he's got that those two rookies have got Aaron Glenn and Deshae Townsend as their coaches. Those are also guys with a lot of experience playing cornerback. So again, you're talking about a guy who provides all of that. Now, what role is he going to play? Well, let's be honest here. If you take a look at Carlton Davis, he's primarily an outside cornerback. He doesn't really play inside a lot. So he is primarily going to be one of the outside corners because he only played in slot so far in the NFL 6.3% of the time that he's been in. He's an outside cornerback. Well, now let's take a look at Terrion Arnold. Terrion Arnold. We already know that Alabama defensive backs have an ability to play well in the defense that the Detroit Lions have. I mean, hello, come on now. Brian Branch last year absolutely had a spectacular season as a rookie, slot safety, joker role, whatever case you want to call him, as a defensive back in the Detroit Lions defense. And if you think about it, Alabama cornerbacks have had a really good time over the last 20 years because of how Nick Saban runs his defense. Well, speaking of Nick Saban is known for his base defense being a 3-4 primarily. But over the last couple of years, what has he altered his defense to? It's either been a 3-3-5 or, wink wink, nudge nudge, a 4-2-5 defense, which is again what Aaron Glenn runs, hence the easy scheme transition that Brian Branch had last year. Again, part of the reason why I think Terrion Arnold is going to be able to pick it up, especially with the fact that he's got one of his teammates there that's also going to help him along. Now, we also know that Terrion Arnold is primarily an outside corner. So, okay, you got one outside corner in Carlton Davis. Now you got another outside corner in Terrion Arnold. But here's one of the great things about Terrion Arnold. I've explained it before. Terrion Arnold has also exceptional, experience in playing in the slot. If you go back to his college stats, Arnold spent 17% of his time playing in the slot. So this is a guy that can play both outside and inside if need be. When you take a look at his total stats from his time in college, you've got a guy that played very, very well. You got a guy that just gave up a little bit over 50% completion percentage rate. And this is at Alabama, mind you, one of the best college program over the last 20 years. Only gave up 53% while at college. Had a 4-6 touchdown interception ratio, so got more interceptions than touchdowns. And his passer rating that he gave up was a 64. The guy played pretty damn good against some of the best talent in the entire NCAA at his time at Alabama. And then when you take a look at his stats from last year specifically, playing against the ranked opponents in the NCAA, again, dude played lights out. When he was playing against the best talent that the NCAA had to offer, he got even better. He played even better. And let's think about it. Some of those guys that I'm talking about, some of those guys that he played against, like LSU and a couple of others, those are guys that got drafted in the same draft that he just got drafted into. And they're on teams that we're going to most likely play up against in the next couple of years, if not this year. So think about it. That right there further personifies what I'm trying to say here. If Terrion Arnold was able to do it in college, and Brian Branch, his teammate, was able to make a very smooth transition from Alabama to the NFL in his first year, I don't see any reason why Arnold can't do it, especially with all the help and support that he's got around him to begin with. But that's not it. There's one more person we got to talk about here. We have to talk about Ennis Rakestraw. We have to bring him into the fold because, hey, Rakestraw, I'm going to say this right now. I'm not as high on Rakestraw as I am Arnold. I'll be honest about that. I'm up forth and I'm very open about it. I'm not as high on Rakestraw as I am Arnold. But that's not to mean that Arnold is, like a vast different in quality versus Rakestraw. He's definitely better. But that's not to say Rakestraw's bad. Rakestraw is, how do I put it? Rakestraw is kind of like the wild card of the group. Davis is a solid, established veteran corner, and Arnold is considered one of the best cornerbacks that is coming out of college this year. Might be even the best, considering who you talk to. But when you take a look at Rakestraw, what about him? He's a bit of a wild card again, like I said. And why is that the case? Well, we know a couple things about Rakestraw. He's extremely physical, which definitely fits in with what, Aaron Glenn wants to do with this defense. Physical, in your face, very aggressive. Problem is that Rakestraw's physicality, his aggressiveness has gotten him in some trouble in the past, aka in the form of penalties. But the other thing we know about Rakestraw is that he's very savvy. He's extremely intelligent, which, if you know how to use that to your advantage, you can definitely have it to, give you some benefits and give you some advantages on a football field. Now, like I said, Terrion Arnold. Arnold has the ability to play both inside and outside. Well, Rakestraw also has demonstrated this ability, and he's actually done it a little bit more than Arnold has. During his time in college, Rakestraw spent almost 21% of his time in the slot. So this is a guy that has spent the majority of his time outside, but he also has spent almost a quarter of his time in college playing in the slot. So think about it here. You've got two outside corners, potentially, in Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold. But now you've also got a guy in Enos Rakestraw who can play outside, but he's also spent a lot of time in the slot as well. So now you have two cornerbacks that can go inside or outside. That gives you a lot of flexibility in this defense, which, if we know one thing about the Lions, that flexibility, that ability to move pieces around is something they really prize, they really value on. Think about it. Brian Branch is primarily a safety, but we've seen him drop down to the slot role, play a joker role. Now you've got Rakestraw and Arnold who can both go inside and outside, no problem. That flexibility is going to give this defense a very vast advantage to other defenses. That's something else to consider here in this conversation. But anyway, getting back to Rakestraw really quickly. What about him, like I said, is a wild card factor? The first thing is his performance in regards to penalties. I'm sorry, but I love the fact that Rakestraw is physical. I love the fact that he's aggressive. But he's been penalized 13 times in his time in college. That's a little bit too much for my liking. That's a little bit too much for almost anybody's liking. It's nice to be physical. It's nice to be aggressive. But you have to temper it. You can't just be going out there and manhandling people. This isn't the days of Mel Blount trying to take people's heads off. I know that's not what he does, but I'm just using that as an extreme example here. You have to temper it. You have to be able to provide sound coverage without necessarily getting flagged for it. But I do believe that he has that ability to be aggressive but controlled at the same time, especially with all the people that are going to be around him to help him. But the other thing that's a bit more problematic as far as a wild card factor is the injury concerns. And again, Brad Holmes has addressed this himself. He specifically said that in his time in college there were injury concerns. Well, think about it. In 2023, Rakestraw missed 4 games, and those were two of those were against ranked opponents, which, if I recall correctly, was Kentucky, and I believe the game that they played for the Cotton Bowl against OSU. He missed both of those games with injuries. And on top of that, he missed the Senior Bowl as well. So it's like there's a bit of a problem with the injury factor here. And when you take a look at his entire time in college, there's 13 games usually in an NCAA football season. Well, if you think about it, he was in college all 4 years. 13 times 4 is 52. Rakestraw only played in 35 out of the 52 games that he could have. That means he only suited up 67.3% of the time. I know this much for a lot of Lions fans. One of the things that's really bugged them ever since Brad Holmes has become the GM is his affinity for drafting guys with injury concerns. And cornerback is one of those positions that already has a high injury rate as it is. But I'm just simply saying, that's one of the things that makes Rakestraw a wild card factor. Is like, okay, first and foremost, is he going to play aggressive to the point where he's going to start becoming a detriment to the team? And is he even going to be available or is he going to be dealing with injuries? But the thing about a wild card factor is also there's sometimes a good aspect to it. Well, think about this here. If you take a look at Rakestraw's stats in college over the last 2 years, They're okay. They're not exactly the greatest. You're talking about a 95 passer rating, 60% completion rate, definitely not very good on touchdown interceptions. Is a 4-to-1 ratio. That don't look that good. However, though, like I did with Terry and Arnold, let's take a look at how Rakestraw has done against the best teams that he's had to play against when he was at the last year here at college. He had 4 games that he played against ranked opponents. You want to know what his stats were in those games? Take a look at them. He absolutely played lights out. A 52% completion rate. Not even 100 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions with a 65.6 passer rating. Pretty much it tells me this. When he was on the field against the best opponents that he had to play, one of 2 things happened. One, they didn't throw it against him very often, and when they did, he didn't allow completions or yards all that often. That for me is like, okay, could this be his norm? Could this be what we are going to start seeing out of him on a normal basis? If he can get the penalties down and he can start being more healthy, I believe it could be. Because it's like, hey, if you can play against the best talent that the NCAA has to offer, just like I said with Terry and Arnold, and those are guys that you're now getting set to play against in the NFL, I don't see any reason why you can't be able to do that. And again, with all of the talent and all the support that he's going to have around him while he's not only at rookie mini camp, but also against, in the spring camp and then training camp and then preseason, he should have plenty of help to get him up to speed. Now, my whole point with bringing all of these statistics, all of this information out was this. When you put it all together, let's consider again that Glenn is wanting to have this defense be both very physical and aggressive, but to be dominating. Well, for a man that has specifically stated that what he wants to be is the best defensive coordinator in Lions history, that for Lions fans or just football fans in general is the bare minimum to start. You have to have a defense that fits those qualities, primarily the aggressive and dominating factor. Well, if Glenn wants to have that, he has to be able to apply pressure to opposing offenses by ratcheting up the blitz and suffocating the passing game, which is by applying primarily tight coverage in man, but also doing it in zone, but man primarily. Well, think about it. Getting Davis, Arnold, and Rakestraw factors heavily into this being able to happen because, again, we already know the Lions' defense in terms of being able to stop the run took a massive leap forward last year. So it's like, okay, we can stop the run. We even showed the ability to stop scrambling quarterbacks for a bit. Now we need to stop them from carving us up through the air with wide receivers. This is where I'm going to bring in Carlton Davis yet again. Think about this, folks. Where did Carlton Davis came from? He came from Tampa underneath Todd Bowles. Like I said, Todd Bowles plays a very aggressive, very heavy man coverage defense, which is exactly what Glenn wants to do. Well, I'm just going to put this up here. Take a look at all 5 of the years, again, that Carlton Davis was with the Bucs. You're going to notice something very, very quickly here. When the blitz percentage was high, they had high amounts of sacks. They also typically had a high amount of pressures, and they had a high amount of turnovers. In fact, if you average all those years up, the Bucs defense had the 4th best blitz percentage in the NFL. They had the 6th highest sack total in the NFL, the 8th highest pressure total, and the 9th highest turnover total. You're talking about a defense that was top 10 in every single statistical category as far as getting after opposing offenses. So, when you think about that, Carlton Davis has already seen from Todd Bowles' defense what to expect for a defense being able to dominate, being able to provide that kind of a defensive output. Plus, like I said, he brings that Super Bowl experience, that scheme experience, that vet experience, blah, 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 blah. Talked about it already. Well, think about it here. If you've already got that going into it, and then you add Rakestraw and you add Terry and Arnold, 2 guys that in college have shown that against the best competition, they can play. Arnold is definitely the much better of the 2. Rakestraw has some things to figure out, but once he does, paired with Arnold and Davis, I believe the Lions can definitely get something out of it. Well, take a look at what the Lions did last year in 2023 under the same categories that I just pulled out for the Bucs defense. You know that Carlton Davis just came from. The Lions were 11th in blitz percentage. They were tied 23rd in sacks. They were the number 1 pressure total defense, and they were ranked 18th in total turnovers. This is where the additions of Arnold, Rakestraw, Davis, the whole lot of them makes their impact. Because think about it. By improving the pass defense, which is what we're talking about here, to turn around, to get this defense from being a letdown to a shutdown defense, there's a correlating effect by fixing the passing defense. Think about it. By having better coverage, that equals more sacks because you get coverage sacks. It also equates to more turnovers because once you start pressuring the quarterback, you start sacking them, you start getting into their head because they're afraid they're going to get hit. Chances are they're going to most likely make a mistake or a bad throw, which means, hey, interceptions. And then on top of that, it means even higher blitz percentage because once you start seeing that blitz starts getting after the quarterback even more so, and you already know you've got good coverage on the back end from your cornerbacks, you're even more bold. You're more aggressive in your play calling to keep ratcheting up the pressure. It's a correlating factor. It's not only on top of that, it's a factor that's a domino effect. It just reinforces itself time after time after time. And for a lot of defenses, they will continue to do this because most offenses don't know how to stop it. So what I'm simply saying is if you fix the coverage problems, which is what getting Arnold, getting Rakestraw, getting Davis is supposed to do, as I've demonstrated thoroughly with Arnold, partly with Rakestraw, but also talking about Carlton Davis, when you start pairing all that together, the Lions can being the operative word, they can be primed for that defensive turnaround that they're going to need for a championship. If you can fix the passing defense like I'm talking about with this entire group that I've gone over, and you start getting all of this stuff to match and move together as a group, as a team, you can really have a defense that is going to bring it to opposing offenses. And our offense has already shown that it can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody. What I'm saying here is this. If the defense is finally able to fix the Achilles heel that it's been having, we could be seeing the Detroit Lions actually competing for a Super Bowl. Again, could. Can. I'm not saying we will, but it's highly more probable than not. But anyway, I just decided I'd put this episode together. I know that I haven't made anything in a while, but I was putting together all this research, also celebrating Mother's Day and all this other stuff that's been going on. So hopefully you guys enjoy the content. But with that having been said, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, again, highly encourage y'all to subscribe. It really helps out the channel. But I also encourage y'all, after you subscribe, please make sure you also turn on that bell notification icon that's right next to it, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all, please, to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you possibly can, so that way the channel can continue to grow and spread. And with that being said, I hope everybody's enjoying themselves. I hope you all had a great day. Hope you all have got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. Hope you all again enjoyed the content. And with that being said, God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.